All right, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, I want to talk about the potential that the UFC actually is interested and wants to do a rematch between Sean O'Malley and Aljamain Sterling. Now, for those of you that don't know, John Anik, UFC broadcaster, and Kenny Florian have a podcast together called the Anik and Florian Podcast. It's kind of refreshing because you do get John Anik at his full potential when he's swearing like a sailor. And if you're used to seeing him on the UFC broadcast, it's a little shocking the first time. But besides that, they have a segment in this podcast called the Ray Longo Minute. Now, it is way longer than a minute, but that is besides the point. In this week's edition of the UFC 292 recap that they did, Ray Longo joined them for the Ray Longo Minute to talk about, and for those of you that aren't aware, he's Aljamain Sterling's head coach, to talk about the fight that happened on Saturday night. Now, whatever you may think of Ray Longo, whether you think he's annoying or you hate hearing him scream or you like hearing him scream or whatever, dude, I think it was pretty classy of him to come on there and talk about it, considering that's a pretty shitty moment to be coming on a podcast. And he was super congratulatory to Tim Welch and Sean O'Malley. John Anik tried to ask him about any injuries that Aljamain may have had leading up to because of the quick turnaround, and he wouldn't mention any of it because he didn't want to take away from what Sean O'Malley did. But in this segment, he mentioned something a little interesting that I had to go back and re-listen to, a little bit of inside scoop of a backstage conversation that happened between the UFC matchmaker Sean Shelby, who matchmakes for the lower weight classes, and Aljamain Sterling right after he got knocked out.
Tell us probably nothing, but what do you think? I mean, he did at the post-fight press conference say, I would like to think that I've earned my right to get an immediate rematch. I'm going to remember this night for a very long time. It's going to fuel me for just bigger and greater things.
Oh, I'm going to say he's going to look at that fight no less than 950,000 times because that's who he is. I mean, and I hope I told him, go on vacation, enjoy yourself, man. Please don't beat yourself up over this. I think he has his priorities straight. He knows what to concentrate on. But getting to the rematch thing, he could say whatever he wants. The UFC's going to do what the UFC's going to do. You could bark and cry all you want, especially him. Then they're not going to, because he's asking for it. But with that said, Sean Shelby, and I hope I'm not misstating this. I mean, in the back, I was delirious, but Sean Shelby said, do you want a rematch? Aljo said 100%. I 100% want the rematch.
Oh, wow.
And so he did. There was talk. I mean, I'm going to say Sean asked him. He said it. And so I'm saying he's getting the rematch.
Good.
I mean, they said the numbers were outstanding for the biggest bantamweight pay-per-view. Is that true?
Wow.
Somebody told me.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, it was.
They're going to be dictated by money. It doesn't matter now who it is. If they made a bank on that thing, they'll do it again for sure. So Sean did say that. Aljo said 100%. No questions about it.
Now, there's a few different ways you can interpret this conversation, I guess, right? Like, Sean Shelby could have just been trying to make friendly small talk because he is going to have to work with Aljamain Sterling moving forward, regardless of whether or not he moves up to 145 or stays where he's at 135 pounds. So maybe he was just trying to be friendly and not make things awkward. But something that stuck out to me was that he actually specifically mentioned to Aljo how this was the highest selling pay-per-view of all time. Now, obviously, I'm sure the majority of that would be due to Sean O'Malley. However, perhaps Aljamain Sterling on accident became the UFC's most successful heel. Like, there is a potential that a ton of people, or maybe not a ton of people, but at least a good chunk of them, are buying the pay-per-view simply to see Aljamain Sterling get knocked out. Do you know what I mean? And if the UFC feels like that fight will sell again, and that there are people that would genuinely buy this pay-per-view just to watch Aljamain Sterling get knocked out again, there's no better way to sell that than with the guy that just knocked him out. Do you know what I mean? Now, obviously, a bunch of people get up in arms when you want to talk about Marlon Chito Vera getting a title shot because, honestly, if we're going based on meritocracy, he is not all that deserving. And now I am a fan of Marlon Chito Vera, but I'll tell you what, dude, historically, a win over Pedro Munoz does not get you a title shot, and he's not even on a win streak, man. Do you know what I mean? So if the UFC feels like they could have trouble selling that fight based on that alone, then they could move forward with that rematch. And not just that, man. Henry Cejudo, somebody else that's in play, is coming off of a loss. So if they feel like they're going to have a hard time selling a guy on a 1-fight win streak, how the fuck are they going to sell a dude coming off of a loss? Now, I know a lot of people want to talk about Corey Sandhagen and Merab. Merab has openly said he does not want it. He wants to wait for Aljamain to get the rematch, so fuck him, dude. I've had enough of that shit, dude. Take your opportunity. Or just fuck off. You don't get to sit out and wait for like 2 years because you want your friend to get his rematch. That's strange. So I'm not even going to bother talking about him. But Corey Sandhagen did say at UFC 292 in an interview that he would be out for at least 6 to 8 months before he could even get into a training camp. So if the UFC feels like they won't be able to really sell a fight between Now, I do think that the fight between Marlon Chito Vera would do just fine. I do think there's a bit of a storyline there. But again, he doesn't even have a fucking win streak going on right now. They could potentially make the rematch between Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley, and obviously hope that Sean O'Malley knocks him out again, okay? But in the meantime, they could rebook, because that was the fight that was supposed to happen at UFC 292, Marlon Chito Vera and Henry Cejudo, and then that way they could actually get 2 title shots in before Corey Sandhagen, even fucking returns. Do you know what I mean? And then also that way, you would have either a guy coming off of a 2-fight win streak who didn't just beat Pedro Munoz, but also beat former UFC champion Henry Cejudo, or you have former champion Henry Cejudo coming off of an actual win against a top 5 guy. So it would be a lot easier to sell either of those fights moving forward. Now, of course, the potential that Aljamain Sterling, okay, because look, I'm not trying to diminish Sean O'Malley's abilities whatsoever. Perfect game plan. He set that right hand up perfectly. It doesn't get much better than that. Do you know what I mean? But if you were to run those two, through a fucking simulator 10 times, how many times do you think that happens? Even if it happens 4 or 5, even 6 times, there's a good chance that Aljamain Sterling makes the adjustments, doesn't rush in so fucking sloppily, and is able to get Sean O'Malley to the mat and do what he wants to Sean O'Malley. And then you have the death of all divisions, a fucking trilogy. Now, this would be a cool trilogy, if I'm being honest, and I would imagine it would sell a fuckload, but it would be, in my opinion, the best time for a trilogy match like that to happen, because I would imagine they are going to try and turn Sean O'Malley around relatively quickly. He's mentioned December multiple times. Aljamain Sterling, if he is offered the rematch, better fucking be ready for that date, because historically he doesn't like making quick turnarounds on 3.5 months, but whatever, dude. They could book Chito and Henry the same night on the same card. If Sean O'Malley wins, the winner of that fight would get the next title shot. If Aljamain Sterling wins, they rebook them in another 3 months or whatever the fuck, do a trilogy match, and then after that, whoever wins gets next. And and then they could do, let's say Chito loses to Henry and they do Henry versus Aljo rematch, they could do Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera as another number 1 contender. Like, there's obviously a lot of fucking moving parts that are involved, and a lot of different things would have to go right in order for this to not completely and totally hold up the division. But Merab is out of play, so fuck him. If I'm not mistaken, Umar Nurmagomedov, who is highly, like, he's up, near the top of the top 15. He's not in the top 5. So, but if I'm not mistaken, dude's coming off of an injury himself. So right now, you've really only got Corey Sandhagen that's actually deserving. And then you've got a bunch of other guys coming off of losses. You've got Marlon Chito Vera with 1 win over Pedro Munoz. Do you know what I mean? So there is time for the UFC to actually do this, so that bantamweight can work itself out. We get a final clear-cut number 1 contender that's not injured coming off of surgery, and it gives time for those guys to heal. So while I would almost, I don't know that I want to see it again, because I don't know how many times Sean O'Malley can do that out of 10. Do you know what I mean? And every time you let him back in the cage with Aljamain Sterling, the potential for him getting taken down, smashed, strangled, whatever the fuck. Now, while his takedown defense did look phenomenal, all it would have taken was 1 good entry from Aljo to get him down. He only shot 2 takedowns. And Aljamain Sterling also historically has horrible takedown accuracy, I think about 24%. So eventually he would have gotten it. Do you know what I mean? there's a potential, man. I don't know if it'll happen. I would rather it didn't, honestly. But if the UFC feels like there was a good chunk of people that actually bought the fucking pay-per-view to watch Aljamain Sterling get knocked out, then they could do it again. Because you even hear walking out, man, crowd noise is crowd noise. Aljo gets booed fucking relentlessly. Like Colby Covington immediately after he started making the crazy statements before people realized he was just acting. The boos that Aljo gets is crazy. Even leaving the fucking octagon, do you know what I mean? It was still going on. So if Dana feels like, well, hey, there's a bunch of people, and I would imagine too, they can compare these pay-per-view numbers to those between Piotr Jan and Aljo 1 and 2. They can compare them to Cejudo and Dillashaw ones and see if there was kind of a gradual build-up and then Sean O'Malley was the cherry on top, or if all those other ones were complete and total fucking duds and then Sean O'Malley was the only sole reason why this sold at all. But if I had to guess, man, I would guess that there are a good chunk of people that were just every single time Aljo fought buying the pay-per-view to see him get fucked up, and now that Sean O'Malley's finally done it, I would imagine those same people would buy that pay-per-view again, because the chances that O'Malley does it again are pretty good now. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you want this matchup as a rematch, or would you rather see Cheeto or somebody else get it? Because they're not going to wait for Corey Sandhagen, you know what I mean? That's too long. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think about Merab straight up saying he's not going to fucking take it and he would rather wait out. Like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I will see you at the next one. Bye-bye.